Hello everyone, this is Ronnie. Thank you for watching, subscribing and continuing to follow this channel, which has mostly been my own personal journey on a raw vegan diet, a raw foods lifestyle, which I've been doing the last 10 years. And yeah, I enjoy it. I very much enjoy and I want to stay healthy and live a healthier life and all that kind of stuff. And if this helps anyone else, then that's really good. So I like to explore my own thoughts and ideas around it. And that's what I'm doing on this channel, I suppose, to try and help other people with it, hopefully. Now, what I wanted to talk about today, I sometimes use these videos to try and clarify my own thoughts on a few things. So it's a little bit self-indulgent, I suppose, but I want to think about the pandemic situation. Up until very recently, it looked like in the UK that it was finishing. Everything was very stable. The hospitalizations, death rates, all that stuff that they look at to make these decisions was stable or falling. People were stopping to wear masks. People weren't so bothered about it anymore, and there was less restrictions than in other parts of Europe, especially in England. There was less restrictions. And all of a sudden, over the course of the last 7 or 10 days, the hysteria and fear and panic and media attention around coronavirus has exploded once again. And the Houses of Parliament voted yesterday in favour of more mask mandates, so more restrictions on masks, some form of COVID passports, whatever that means, but essentially for people going into clubs and large events. And what kind of people go into clubs and large events? Can anyone think, who goes to clubs? Is it your 85-year-old grandmother going to clubs and large events? The people that are vulnerable? No. So they've not closed down libraries and restaurants, which is where older people go, but they're happy to close down places that older people don't go, weirdly enough. So anyway, that's an interesting thought. They also have mandated for all NHS workers. NHS is the health service in the UK, all the hospitals, all the doctors' surgeries. They're mandating that everyone who works in the NHS who's a frontline worker, essentially working with patients, must be vaccinated. Our MPs have voted for that. Enforced mandatory vaccinations for frontline workers. So I don't know how I want to go through all those points in this video. Oh, and by the way, if you want to get away from all this madness, right, the UK Fruitfest will be happening next year, July 22nd to the 29th. And I'll put a link down below if you want to go and find out more about it. We have a film about the whole event, about what we're doing, also about the worldwide crisis at the moment. So click down below and you can go and watch that and get more information about UK Fruitfest. And thank you if you are coming, and if you support that, great. So I get a lot of, to be honest, personal sort of anger, resentment around this whole situation, around this whole thing, and it's been quite difficult for me to stay a bit more stable and rational and balanced about the whole thing, and trying to communicate in a better way, in a more effective way. So I don't think it really works to be sort of saying to everyone, well, look, isn't this obviously so stupid? Isn't this so unbelievably moronic, everything that's happening here? Because you find that the vast majority of people think you're crazy, think you're a lunatic. The vast majority of people are just listening to the mainstream press, assuming that everything is absolutely accurate and right, and has been checked, and there's the scientists and the science and the blah blah blah, and blindly going along with it, and it doesn't matter how ridiculous it gets. People are just still blindly going along with it. The vast majority of people, sadly. Now, it reminds you that the vast majority of people do not question things, don't deeply look into things. A lot of people don't have the intelligence to, or the confidence or faith in themselves to do it. So they blindly follow because they don't want to look into it. They've got no interest. It's not affecting them yet personally, or they think it's not affecting them yet. So they can't be bothered. They want to think of other things. Or they fully believe in it and they have looked into it a little bit and they believe what they're hearing and seeing. So I want to backpedal for why am I feeling so... firstly, why do I not trust the information? Why do I feel annoyed about the whole situation that's come up? Well, I suppose I don't really start from a perspective of viruses don't exist and they're not a thing. Of course viruses do exist, as in they are proteins that come into our body that can replicate and things like that. We understand there's something going on there. I'm seriously interested as to whether we have ever definitely 100% proved that viruses are the cause of the symptoms that people get. I have to assume that we 100% know that. 100% we know that the vaccines, the viruses are the cause of the symptoms of all the various diseases out there. Let's take a step back even further though. Where do the viruses come from? The viruses, in terms of the infectious diseases of the 20th century, that mostly seem to have started in the 20th century, a little bit before that, 19th century and so on. These, in fact, they don't know, it won't be the 20th century, but there was a lot more than multiplied in the 20th century, I believe. But all these viruses, and we're assuming that it's the viruses that cause the symptoms, infectious diseases, polio, smallpox, German measles, mumps, measles, rubella, which is German measles, I think, whooping cough, a bunch of things like that, all these different things, influenza and the common cold. All of these things come from animals. Every single one of them comes from animals. Every single one comes from the transfer of these diseases from animals to humans. And that only happens when humans start to farm animals intensively. So my personal belief with animals, I am a vegan, so I believe we shouldn't be using animals as products and all that, but I essentially believe we should leave animals alone. I don't think we should be touching animals. I don't think we should be petting animals, stroking them. I don't think we should really have them in our houses. I think we should leave them alone to do their own thing. If we have to intervene for certain reasons, fair enough, but generally, when I've observed animals, I don't think they really want to be around humans. Sorry to say that to a lot of you, but I go into people's houses and I don't see animals that seem to want to be around the people some of the time. But let's not go into that distraction. All of these diseases come from animals. The serious conversation that hasn't been had, if we were really, really looking to make an effort to get rid of these diseases, the serious conversation is we need to go vegan. That's just it. We need to go vegan. If we don't want millions of people dying of coronavirus, we need to stop farming animals. We need to stop producing these diseases if these viruses are what's causing all the problems. So that's the first stage. Now, why am I skeptical a little bit about all this? No conversation seriously about where the problem comes from, which is from the intensive farming of animals. and unnatural farming of animals. Supposedly coronavirus came from the wet markets of China. We don't really even know that. Or is it from a lab? Who knows? People are saying other things. Okay, so that's one stage of it. Do the viruses even cause disease? Well, even if they do play a role, even if viruses play a role, how often do they actually cause disease in truly healthy people? Is another question. Truly healthy people. So if people were living a healthy life, were eating a diet of fruits and vegetables, getting out into sunlight, not going overboard with stress, exercise, all these things, but primarily a better diet, because diet's the worst thing that people are making a problem with. If that was the case, how many people would get measles, mumps, rubella, and all these things, influenza, cold? Like, how many people is the problem that they were just a sick person? How many of the children that got these diseases over the years were unwell, or having an unhealthy lifestyle? I don't know, but all I'm saying is there's no conversation about veganism. There's no conversation about what are the other factors that lead towards people developing the symptoms. Because from my perspective, from what I've seen, it's generally people that are sicker. If you think about influenza, flu, who is it that suffers from it more? It's older people, sicker people, more vulnerable people. People that go out and drink a lot, people that smoke a lot are going to have problems with these things more. So why isn't the conversation way more about what are the healthy lifestyle practices? What's the health? There's no conversation around that. There's really no conversation around that at all. This is a great time to try and get a public shift in attitudes towards lifestyle, and nothing's happened there. And what kind of impact would that have had? Could that have saved even more lives? Who knows? So I've already got this skepticism from these points of view, right? Do the viruses really cause the symptoms? Are they really the cause? Or is it a combination of the virus and all the other unhealthy habits, the person being vulnerable in themselves, the person having maybe even genetic issues or things that make them more vulnerable? And in that case, in that case, that's something. But so I've got an immediate skepticism there. Then you got to ask yourself, when it comes to some of the rules that came in, why had none of these been done in the past? If they work. Because we've always had people dying of respiratory diseases, supposedly, apparently, right? So flu and things like that. We've always had people dying from flu. We've never encouraged anyone to wear a mask. Now, I can understand that, like, if you're not vulnerable, why would you wear a mask? But why wouldn't you encourage people that are vulnerable to wear a mask? And are we really to think that there's not been that over the 70, 80, 100 years since the last major flu pandemic in 1918, in that time, there's not been any research around masks ever that has showed them to work until now? Even at the start of the pandemic, they were saying, masks don't really work. There's no point in wearing a mask. But now they work. If they had been working all this time, why did we never say to people to wear them if they were vulnerable? I can understand you maybe don't get the whole society to do it, but why wouldn't you say, if you're an elderly person, if you're vulnerable, if you have these diseases, makes you more likely to die from flu, wear a mask if you like, to prevent your risk? Why did we never, ever say that? Because we must have known it wasn't. It didn't work. it didn't make a difference, or we didn't think it was worth invading into a person's life to do that, or whatever it was. And that's one of the reactions to it, obviously. The other reactions, things like shutting down borders, these were never part of the pandemic playbook. And that's the other thing. There's these things that have never been part of the real playbook of how to deal with a pandemic, coming from the epidemiologist himself. Then you've got a situation where you've got the people that are advising the government have been wrong so much and are not even specialists in the area that we would expect them to be. The behavioural psychologists and things like that, mathematicians, statisticians. A bizarre group in the UK, one of the people involved is literally in the Communist Party. It's just amazing that we're taking advice from this person. And she wants the pandemic to last forever, the restrictions to last forever. Crazy. We're talking about absolute mental case people who have no right to be in the positions they're in. So these are some of the reasons that I'm sceptical about it. Another reason that I'm sceptical about all these things is because from my last 10 years of research, of study, of learning, of meeting people, and even going to mainstream sources, people are reversing heart disease, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, autoimmune conditions, digestive disorders, even cancer to some degree, through changing their diet. We know that diet is the biggest factor. The global burden of disease, which was actually funded by Bill Gates, the global burden of disease study said the biggest issue, health-wise, was diet. Biggest risk factor is diet. And yet, once again, but none of these big organisations, including really the NHS, including the government, yes, they say eat a healthier diet, but they don't say this is the cause and this is the solution. And that's a real problem to me. So how can I really not be a little bit sceptical about any information that comes from the government, from the mainstream media, from supposedly the scientists or whatever people they've got that they call scientists that are advising them, that have so many conflicts of interest. And this is the problem with the whole medical community and these experts. They have such conflicts of interest because they're educated within a particular system. They're educated within a system that is all about medical solutions, pharmaceutical solutions. Where do you think that? Why do you think the education has become like that? Who do you think might have funded that? Who's pushed it that way? It goes where the money goes, which is in pharmaceuticals, unfortunately. Now, some of the pharmaceuticals, it's not like pharmaceuticals don't work for certain things, but they don't cure heart disease, diabetes, lung cancer, things that are caused by lifestyle, stroke, all the things that people actually need to be worried about. Not flu, not COVID. We don't have medical cures. It doesn't matter how much money has been put into research, and it's all a money game. It's all a power game. It's all, where can we get the next research grant? Oh, they want us to, they want to research COVID now, and then, but a couple of years ago it would have been something else, and a couple of years it would be something else. So there's a lot of scientists and all that are on the side of, we should use hydrochloroquine, we should use ivermectin, it's like, fuck the pharmaceuticals, man. We should be changing our diet. Get rid of this nonsense message that the important thing is more pharmaceuticals. It's not more pharmaceuticals. It doesn't matter if they're off-label things that there's no profit in. We shouldn't be taking any of these things. The problem with people becoming vulnerable to these diseases is they're already got factors that lead towards disease, comorbidities. They've already got high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes. They're overweight. Over and over, they have all these symptoms of disease, of lifestyle. And these lifestyle diseases are what are making people vulnerable to things like influenza, to actually dying from these things, because they become another little factor. So I don't hear the message coming out, the true message, the truth. It's all about diet. So how can I believe anything in the mainstream? How can I just believe it face value when they're not telling people you reverse heart disease by changing your diet, you reverse diabetes through changing your diet? Even the Heart Disease Foundation, the Diabetes Foundation, the big charities, the cancer charities, they're not shouting this stuff from the rooftops. There's a bias towards trying to find medical interventions. It's not going to work. So that's part one of this little exploration for myself. Trying to summarize the video a little bit. There's no mention of veganism to get rid of the production of these viruses through the animal industry. No mention of it, really. No serious mention. There's no mention of really the explanation of, there's just an assumption that these viruses are the problem. There's an assumption that the viruses are causing the problem. Is it the virus, or is it the combination of the virus and the person's other unhealthy habits? And therefore, what's the one to get rid of? We can't get rid of the virus. We can change the habits. But there's been no mention of changing habits. There's been no mention as to whether really the problem with these pandemics has been that people are already sick. That's why for some people they cause a problem, and most people they don't. Vast majority of people do not have any major issue from these viruses. So, and then just no mention of diet across the media, across the board. Very little mention of it from the major organisations, from even the medical schools themselves. They're not teaching the truth. And this is information that's been known for a long time. There's huge biases against looking into diet, because the power and the money, even the personal power of a doctor, comes from the fact that they are the only person that is allowed to prescribe medication. That's their power. If you start to tell people your diseases are all your own, the diet, for a start, they don't need to go to a doctor. They can go to a nutritionist. They can go to completely unqualified people because they don't need medication anymore. So the whole power is in these, medications, these magical potions that work or don't work. So thank you for watching. Feel free to subscribe. If you want to check out the Fruit Festival and come to a place with a bit more sanity, hopefully, I'll put a link down below. Feel free to leave a message. I'll make a few more videos, but I'm running out of time on this one, so that's why I'm cutting it short. And thank you very much for following.